everyone. My name is Ishmeen, and we are team number 4. And our topic for today is infection control labs in a busy dental clinic. Imagine walking into a busy dental clinic on a Monday morning. The waiting room is full, the phones are ringing, patients are scheduled back to back. Everything is moving quickly to stay on time. Now imagine that in the middle of all of that, something gets skipped. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just skipped. This case involves a high volume urban dental clinic seeing approximately 40 to 50 patients per day. Due to increasing performance demands and staffing shortages, sterilization protocols were not followed. Some instruments did not even complete their full autoclave cycle. Biological indicator testing was not done, and the sterilization logs were incomplete. So the issue came to light when a patient noticed that a sterilized instrument package appeared improperly sealed and reported the concern. That single observation triggered a public health investigation. At first glance, this may seem like a procedural mistake. However, in the healthcare setting, infection control is measurable performance standard. When these standards are not consistently met, it raises a serious concern about accountability and not only of individuals, but of the entire clinical system. In dentistry, infection control is not optional, it is a matter of professional accountability. Accountability in healthcare means that all healthcare professionals are answerable for maintaining safety standards and ensuring that proper systems are in place to protect patients. Dentists and even all doctors are responsible for ensuring that sterilization protocols are properly monitored and documented. Additionally, the failure to do so or to follow infection prevention standards can increase the risk of transmitting blood-borne pathogens such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, or HIV. So, what makes this case especially relevant to our course is the tension between accountability and performance. In high pressure environments, productivity demands, such as seeing more patients, and it can conflict with safety standards. So, when that happens, we must ask, is accountability individual? Is it shared across the team? Or does it rest with the leadership and the organizational systems? So, this case challenges us to examine where responsibility truly lies when performance expectations begin to compromise patient safety.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aisha. I will be analyzing the top accountability failures in this case. While at first glance the issue appears to be a simple infection control lapse, a deeper accountability analysis reveals layered breakdowns at the individual, team, and system levels. At first, this appears to be individual failure. A dental assistant reused handpieces without completing full sterilization. Importantly, this action was not driven by malicious intent. It was driven by time pressure and the need to keep the clinic running on schedule. This reflects what Schmidt describes as the normalization of deviance. Over time, unsafe workarounds can become routine when they appear to work and when no immediate negative consequences occur. What begins as a one-time shortcut gradually becomes accepted practice. Now, while personal responsibility absolutely exists, Bishop reminds us that accountability must be understood within system constraints. The assistant made the decision, but the decision occurred in an environment shaped by limited instruments, productivity pressure, and workflow demands. So, at the individual level, yes, there was a lapse in professional accountability, but the key question is, why did the system make the unsafe choice easier than the safe one? This leads us to the team level. At the team level, we see a collective accountability failure. There was no escalation when equipment shortages occurred. Instead of raising concerns, the team collectively prioritized maintaining the schedule. This reflects a culture where productivity was valued over patient safety. Johnson and Humble describes this as a psychological safety gap. When team members do not feel safe speaking up, especially about operational pressures, silence becomes normalized, and silence reinforces unsafe practices. There is also a leadership tension here. As discussed by Siegel and Siegel, the balance between professional autonomy and managerial intervention. Leaders may hesitate to intervene in clinical workflows, while staff may hesitate to challenge operational decisions. The result is a shared but unspoken agreement to make it work, even when safety is compromised. So, at this level, accountability is no longer individual, it becomes collective. The team culture enabled the workaround to continue. Finally, and most importantly, we reached the system level failure. At the structural level, there was insufficient instrument inventory for the clinic's patient volume. When resources do not match the workload, pressure is inevitable. There were also incomplete sterilization documentation systems. Documentation gaps reduce traceability and weaken accountability mechanisms. Additionally, there was a lack of routine audits and performance monitoring. Smith et al. Emphasize that performance measurement systems are critical to accountability. If you are not measuring compliance, you are not truly enforcing it. Luft also discusses incentive misalignment. When productivity metrics dominate performance evaluation, safety behaviors may become secondary, even unintentionally. So, this was not just about one assistant or one team, it was about structural weaknesses. Limited resources, documentation gaps, lack of oversight, and misaligned incentives. This system conditions made unsafe behavior easier than safe behavior. And that is a key insight of this case. This was not one person's failure, it was a system that shaped behavior in predictable ways. To truly improve accountability, we must design systems where the safe choice is the easiest choice.
Hello everyone, I am Akshita and I will discuss why immediate action is required. So, if something like this happened in our clinic, the first 24 hours will be very critical. Patient safety always comes first. When there is a chance that instruments were not properly sterilized, we can't just wait or hope that nothing will happen. Acting quickly is the only way to protect people and prevent bigger problems. There are three main reasons to respond immediately. First, to protect the patients, because instruments that aren't sterile can cause serious infections. By stopping procedures right away, we make sure that no one else is exposed and we reduce the risk of harm. Second, to meet our professional responsibility. As healthcare providers, we are expected to respond quickly, document what happened, and inform the leaders. Delaying action can make the situation worse and may lead to legal consequences. Third, to make sure everything is transparent and the system improves. Clear documentation, reviewing the sterilization logs, and notifying the right people help us figure out what went wrong. This way, the same problem is less likely to happen again. So, what should be done in the first 24 hours? First, all non urgent procedures should be stopped immediately. This gives the team time to focus on safety and prevent any further exposure. Next, all handpieces and reusable instruments should be quarantined. Keeping them separate ensures that they are not used by mistake. Then emergency sterilization checks needs to be done. This confirms that the sterilizer is working correctly and the instruments are safe to use. Sterilization and biological indicator logs should also be reviewed carefully. These logs tell us when the instruments were sterilized and whether the process met safety standards or not. Understanding this is helpful because it will uh, identify exactly where the failure happened. Then any patient who may have been exposed should be identified. Contacting them quickly allows them to receive proper care and reduce the chance of complications. Finally, infection control advisors needs to be notified immediately. They provide guidance, support, and make sure that proper safety steps are followed. Taking these actions quickly protects patients, staff, and the clinic. It shows responsibility, strengthens trust, and helps prevent future failures. Patient safety always comes first, and handling situation in a clear and organized way is the best way to keep everyone safe and confident in the care we provide.
So, in the last slide, we saw why immediate actions are required and what these would be. But to understand the responsibility in this crisis, it is necessary to clarify what accountability means. So, Rosen et al. Argue that accountability in healthcare consists of three core components, which would be loci, domains, and procedures. In other words, we must identify who is accountable for what and through what mechanism. The loci in this case includes the individual clinician who reused instruments, the clinic leadership responsible for oversight, and the regulatory authority mandated to protect the public. The domains include professional competence, ethical conduct, and public safety. This lapse is not merely a documentation error, it represents a breach in multiple accountability domains. Rosen et al. Further emphasized that accountability requires more than assigning responsibility, it requires information and the possibility of sanctions or corrective measures. Incomplete sterilization logs and missed audits represent a breakdown in accountability procedures. Therefore, before deciding what to do next, we must recognize that this is a layered accountability failure, not an isolated mistake. Now, this case also reflects a governance failure. Rosen et al. Explains that accountability mechanisms require clear identification of responsibility, adequate information, and enforceable consequences. In complex healthcare systems, responsibility can be blurred, especially when productivity pressures dominate safety culture. Here, incomplete sterilization documentation and insufficient oversight suggest a breakdown in governance mechanism. Rosen et al. Argue that modern health systems have seen an expansion of public stewardship. Governments, regulatory bodies are increasingly accountable for ensuring quality, safety, and integration of care. In British Columbia specifically, Aldridge notes that professional regulation exists primarily to protect the public from unsafe practices. Therefore, this is not merely an internal clinic issue as well. It is a matter of public trust and a regulatory obligation. The stewardship responsibility to protect the patients outweighs concerns about reputable damages. Now, this leads directly to the critical decision point whether to disclose immediately or to delay this information. Now we come to a center dilemma to whether disclose immediately or delay pending internal review. From an accountability perspective, the answer is clear. Rosen et al. Argue that accountability requires identification of responsibility, provision of information, and enforceability. Withholding information from potentially exposed patients would violate this core principle. Rosen et al. Further emphasized that accountability procedures require transparency in domains of ethical conduct and public health protection. Therefore, a structured response must include, first, an immediate risk assessment to determine which patient has been exposed. Second, transparent communication with affected patients, including clinical guidance and follow-up actions. Third, formal reporting to the regulatory authority and implementation of corrective performance measures. So, this response shifts the clinic from defensive position to accountable recovery. Accountability in this case is not about blame, it is about restoring public trust, strengthening governance systems, and preventing recurrence. Now, the further will be explained by Tamanna.
Hi, to sum it up, I would like to say that this case is not just the absence of infection control knowledge, but it is the failure of accountability architecture. Rosen et al. Argues and gives us insight that accountability fails when responsibility is unclear, which was a standard example here, that there was no clear ownership of safety processes. And to negate it, we need to create a system that creates clear ownership for everybody. Plus, the information is incomplete and oversight mechanisms do not function continuously, which brings me to my next point, that there should be continuous monitoring, not just episodic checks. In other words, safety standard may exist on paper. There are episodic checks, but accountability collapses when those standards are not actively reinforced or monitored. Further, healthcare accountability, as Rosen et al. Says, is never one layer system. It is multi-layered. It does not reside just on the frontline staff, but it extends to the manager, organizational leadership, and governing bodies to ensure that the systems support a safe practice. In our case, the prevention failed because accountability was fragmented, sterilization processes continued despite missed indicators, incomplete logs, and growing workload pressure. Here, there is a need of leadership to steward the organization towards a safe culture. Prevention here failed not because staff was negligent, but because the system normalized risk under pressure. Now let's talk about designing prevention. The literature stays consistent on the fact that prevention in healthcare cannot rely just on the goodwill of professional ethics. There needs to be a deeper embedded system that is designed to prevent harm, especially in high volume environments. What could be done is adequate staffing, realistic performance expectation, which in turn requires performance indicators and continuous quality oversight. There should be clear assignment, continuous monitoring, adequate staffing, and corrective indicators and actions when a mishap happens. Smith et al. Further talks about this and says that performance measures should be tied to system improvement rather than just retrospective reporting. There needs to be a translation into action. In this case, for example, sterilization monitored occur, but it was never translated into an action, which was seen in missed biological testing that did not ever triggered an escalation, which indicates that a system was embedded which let it pass through and hence lead to failure of performance management rather than just an individual compliance. A further trend can be seen in COVID-19 by Meher, who documents that Canada's early pandemic response was not because of lack of expertise, but because of delayed decision making, unclear authority, and fragmented accountability, which is as same as our case. Well, true prevention fixes occur when there is leadership accountability, which brings me from system level fixes to leadership responsibility, where leaders must be responsible not just for the outcomes but for ensuring that frontline staff are never forced to choose between safety or speed. There should be a system and there should be performance data that could be referred to, and there should be an early intervention wherever the warning signs appear. Now let's talk about once the failure has occurred, now the accountability shifts from prevention to response to repair. As Elridge notes that it is our responsibility as professionals because patients cannot independently assess their safety risks. It is our duty as healthcare organization to act transparent when the standards are breached. So accountability action required after the breach would be transparent disclosure, timely reporting to the regulatory and public health authorities, and implementations of corrective and preventative measures. Rosen et al. Further identify that ethical conduct and public notification health protection as core domains of accountability, and it is grounded in respect of patient autonomy and public trust. Further, there needs to be a reframing of here. We cannot take the mechanism of blame, rather, as McKee, Cooper, and Trammell emphasize, it needs to change its perspective and get that from a core of stewardship, acknowledging harm, sharing information, and committing to the corrective action. Overall, I would like to summarize that this case happened because there was a breach and there was a collapse of accountability structure. So we need to make sure that in healthcare setting, a system is organized and accountability is not just a part of one person, but is a systemic requirement. That is all from our team. Thank you so much for listening.